The lecture hall buzzed with chatter as students filed in, some laughing, some glued to their phones. Among the crowd walked Sophia, a young Muslim woman from America, her steps calm but her heart heavy. She had grown used to the stares, the muffled laughter, the mocking glances. Every day on campus felt like a silent battle. And yet, she never missed a class. She wore her hijab with quiet dignity, her modest clothing a stark contrast to the shorts and sleeveless tops worn by others. To many, she was the fanatic girl, the one stuck in old traditions. But Sophia knew who she was. Her faith wasn't just a label, it was her strength. Still, the ridicule stung. No matter how composed she looked on the outside, inside her heart would whisper, "Why can't they understand?" Today felt no different. She entered the large philosophy classroom and sat near the middle, trying to stay unnoticed. A group in the corner whispered and giggled. "Look, there she is again, the hijab girl." Sophia clenched her notebook, refusing to react. She was here to learn, not to fight. Then the door opened. Professor Anderson walked in, tall, confident, and known for one thing: his disdain for religion, especially Islam. The room fell silent. His tone was smooth but sharp. "Today," he announced, "we're discussing myths, outdated beliefs. Let's begin with Islam." Whispers turned into smirks. All eyes slowly shifted to Sophia. And she knew. This wasn't just a lecture, it was a battle for truth. Sophia sat still, her hands trembling slightly around her notebook. Laughter rippled across the classroom, low, taunting. She was no stranger to it. But today, something inside her shifted. This wasn't just another offhand insult or side glance. Professor Anderson's words were a direct attack on everything she believed in. "And why," he continued, pacing slowly before the class, "do people in this so-called modern era still cling to outdated rituals? Muslims fast. Why? They circle a black stone in the desert. Why? They read a book full of contradictions. Why?" The students chuckled. Some laughed out loud. But Sophia didn't bow her head this time. She raised her hand. Silence. The same room that just moments ago echoed with laughter now froze. Eyes widened. Even the professor paused, clearly surprised. The quiet, veiled girl who had always been the target was about to speak. Sophia stood, her voice steady. "Professor, with all due respect, fasting isn't just a religious act. It's a scientifically supported practice. Medical studies have proven that intermittent fasting improves brain function, enhances cellular repair, and even extends lifespan. Islam commanded it over 1400 years ago." The class was stunned. A few students glanced at each other, taken aback by her calm confidence. Professor Anderson tried to scoff it off. "And what about the Hajj? Circling a stone, is that science too?" Sophia didn't waver. "Professor, have you ever been to a concert or a World Cup match? Thousands gather, wear the same colors, chant together, move in rhythm. Why? Because it unites them. The Hajj does the same, on a far deeper level. Millions from every corner of the world come together, in unity, shedding status, ego, and materialism. They wear the same clothing, walk the same path. It's not about the stone, it's about the soul." There was no mockery now, no smirks, just silence. Sophia continued, her voice gentler now. "The rituals you call outdated have layers of meaning. Islam isn't just about actions, it's about transformation. Fasting disciplines the self. Hajj humbles the heart. They're not myths, they're medicine for the soul." For the first time, Professor Anderson looked unsettled. The classroom, once so sure in its scorn, was now breathless. And Sophia, once mocked, now stood tall, not to prove anyone wrong, but to stand for what was right. The room sat in silence, yet the tension was thick. No one expected the girl they used to mock would speak with such composure, such clarity. But Professor Anderson wasn't ready to yield. His brows furrowed. He stepped forward, voice sharpened like a blade. "All right then, Sophia," he said, crossing his arms. "Let's talk about something deeper. If your God is so loving, then why create hell? Isn't eternal punishment the opposite of mercy? Why would a loving God torture his own creation?" Gasps echoed. The question was cruel and calculated. But Sophia didn't flinch. Instead, she smiled gently, then asked, "Professor, do you believe that a just judge should punish a murderer or criminal?" He blinked, caught off guard. "Well, of course," he replied. "Then why wouldn't God, who is the most just, hold people accountable too?" Sophia took a breath. Hell is not a contradiction of love. It's the completion of justice. If we all have free will, if we can choose to do good or evil, then justice demands consequences. Otherwise, what's the point of right and wrong? The professor stared at her, unable to counter. "And remember," Sophia added softly, "God doesn't want people in hell, but he allows us the freedom to choose our path. Heaven and hell reflect the justice of our own decisions." Some students, who had previously snickered, were now looking down at their desks, thinking. The idea that hell wasn't cruelty, but accountability, shook them. Still, the professor wasn't done. "Fine, let's talk about women. Why are Muslim women told to cover up? Why must they follow a dress code that seems so oppressive?" Sophia's jaw tightened, but her voice stayed calm. "Professor, do you believe a woman has the right to choose how she dresses?" "Absolutely," he replied, confidently. "Then why is it," Sophia continued, locking eyes with him, "that when a woman chooses to wear less, it's called freedom, but when she chooses to cover, it's called oppression?" The room went quiet again. "True freedom," she said, "is the ability to choose. Many women, like myself, wear the hijab not because we are forced, but because we feel empowered, protected, and proud. Isn't that what feminism stands for? Choice?" Her voice echoed not just across the walls, but across hearts. And in that moment, the debate was no longer about religion. It was about truth. Professor Anderson stood frozen for a moment. He hadn't expected such clarity, such resistance. Yet Sophia stood tall, her calm gaze unsettling him more than any shouted argument could. But he wasn't ready to surrender. "Let's talk about justice again," he said, his voice lower but still defiant. "Islam gives men more in inheritance than women. How is that fair? Why don't women get equal shares?" Sophia nodded slowly. "Professor, Islam's inheritance laws are based on responsibility, not favoritism. Men are obligated to provide for their families, wife, children, even extended relatives. Women, on the other hand, are not required to spend a single penny of what they inherit. What they receive is solely theirs." She continued, "So yes, the shares are different, but the burden is too. Islam doesn't assign equal amounts. It assigns fair ones, depending on roles." Several students exchanged glances. For the first time, they understood that Islamic law wasn't arbitrary. It was structured. And fairness, Sophia added, doesn't always mean sameness. It means balance. And that balance is what Islam protects. The professor stepped back slightly, the cracks in his confidence becoming visible. His lips parted, but no words came. He was beginning to realize that every challenge he threw came back with clarity, reason, and undeniable logic. Sophia paused, then looked directly at him. "You see, Professor, many people judge Islam by looking at Muslims who don't follow it. But you'll never understand a system by only looking at the ones who abuse it. If you want to know the truth about Islam, read the Quran." The room was still. You could hear the faint hum of the projector, the ticking of the wall clock, but all attention remained on Sophia. Then she asked softly, "Did you know that the Quran contains scientific truths that were only discovered in the last century? Descriptions of embryology, the expanding universe, the depths of the oceans, all in a book revealed 1400 years ago to a man who couldn't read or write. Professor Anderson blinked. His mind raced. The words struck deeper than he'd expected. Sophia continued, "How could an illiterate man write a book that even today no one can replicate? A book that hasn't changed, not even by a letter, for 14 centuries." And for the first time, Professor Anderson had no answer, just silence. The silence in the room was no longer just silence. It was reflection, a quiet storm of thoughts. Professor Anderson's shoulders had dropped. His expression was no longer sharp or condescending. It was lost, humbled. He looked at Sophia, not with pride or defiance, but with something that no one in the class had ever seen on his face before. Tears. He turned his gaze away, then slowly raised his hands to his face, trying to hide the emotion rushing over him. But it was too late. Everyone saw it. The professor who had once mocked faith now stood trembling in front of it. "I don't know what to say," he whispered, his voice breaking. "All this time, I thought I understood the world. I thought I was right." Sophia said nothing. She simply stood still, watching him, her face calm. There was no trace of triumph, only sincerity. Then came the words no one expected to hear. "I want to change," Professor Anderson said, lifting his head with visible effort. "I've spent years criticizing something I never truly studied. I mocked a faith I never tried to understand." He looked at Sophia again, eyes glistening. "I want to learn. I want to read the Quran. I want to understand Islam with an open heart." Gasps filled the room. Some students covered their mouths. Others simply stared. The shift was too real to be ignored. Then, with a trembling voice, Professor Anderson added, "I want to say the Shahada. I want to become a Muslim." Time stopped. Even Sophia froze for a moment, processing what she had just heard. Then slowly a smile broke across her face, not of victory, but of deep, quiet gratitude. One student raised his hand. It was someone who had often joined in mocking her. His voice was soft. "Sophia, can you help me learn too?" She nodded gently. "Of course." That day, something extraordinary happened. A class once filled with judgment and ridicule began to ask questions, real questions, with open minds. It all started with one girl's courage to speak, and one man's courage to listen. And in the echo of that moment, many hearts were changed, not by force, not by fear, but by truth, clarity, and light. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Subhanallah. This is the story of a church that was transformed forever after a 12-hour theological debate between a humble Muslim youth and a respected Christian pastor. A story so extraordinary it shook an entire town, left a congregation in tears, and witnessed the light of guidance descending upon hearts once firmly closed. It all began in a quiet town nestled between peaceful hills and winding roads, the kind of place where everyone knew each other's names. In the center of this town stood an old towering church with stained glass windows and a proud bell tower that echoed every Sunday morning. This church was led by Pastor David, a charismatic preacher known for his powerful voice and unwavering conviction. His sermons attracted not just locals, but curious minds from nearby cities as well. That Sunday morning, however, something was different. The pews were filled as usual, the choir ready with their opening hymns, but Pastor David walked straight to the pulpit without beginning with a prayer. He scanned the congregation with a piercing gaze, his voice sharp as he announced, "Next Sunday, we will hold a grand discussion in this very church." A murmur spread across the audience. "We will be inviting a young Muslim man named Ahmad," he continued, "a so-called scholar of the Quran. He is well known in this town for preaching Islam. And we will show him, and all who follow him, that truth lives here, in the house of God." The congregation erupted in cheers and applause. Many were excited at the prospect of watching their beloved pastor debate and, they assumed, dismantle this young Muslim with ease. Meanwhile, on the quieter side of town, in a humble mosque with whitewashed walls and a palm tree swaying gently outside, Ahmad sat surrounded by community members after the Asr prayer. He was a soft-spoken young man, respected not only for his memorization of the Quran, but for his character, calm, gentle, and sincere. His face carried a serenity that belied his youth. When the invitation from Pastor David arrived, several elders warned him. "This is a trap," said an older man named Uncle Jamil. "They want to embarrass you in front of a crowd. This isn't just discussion, it's theater." But Ahmad only smiled and replied, "If their intention is bad, Allah will judge. My job is to speak the truth, with wisdom, patience, and sincerity." The elders fell silent. In that moment, they knew Ahmad would not back down. Word spread quickly. Flyers were printed. The event was promoted as a historic faith encounter. By Friday evening, the town was buzzing. Some prepared to witness a great debate. Others came out of sheer curiosity. And on Sunday morning, the stage was set. Sunday morning arrived, heavy with expectation. Outside the church, the air was unusually crisp. A large crowd gathered, not just regular worshippers, but visitors, skeptics, and local media who had heard about the highly anticipated debate. Inside, every pew was filled, and even the back aisles were crowded with people standing. A subtle hum of whispers filled the sanctuary, mingling with the sunlight that streamed through the stained glass. The organ did not play that morning. There was no opening hymn. Pastor David stood proudly at the front, wearing a navy robe with a silver cross glinting on his chest. His posture was stiff, his jaw set. And then, the side door opened. In walked Ahmad, calm, unbothered, wearing a simple white shirt and black trousers. He held a small leather pouch containing the Quran and greeted the room with a respectful nod. His eyes were gentle, his expression composed. Some in the audience chuckled under their breath. Others scoffed. "This boy thinks he can argue with Pastor David?" The pastor didn't wait. As soon as Ahmad was seated on the opposite side of the stage, he rose and addressed the audience with thunder in his voice. "Today, you will witness clarity. You will hear why Christianity is the only true path, and why other messages that came after are mere imitations." He turned toward Ahmad, eyes sharp. "Let's begin. Tell us, if Islam is from God, why did it come centuries after Jesus? Why follow a prophet who appeared after the Bible had already revealed the truth? Isn't Islam simply a copied religion, fabricated hundreds of years later?" Loud applause followed. Many nodded with smug satisfaction. Ahmad waited for the noise to settle. He stood slowly, held the Quran close to his chest, and began. "Thank you, Pastor, for allowing this conversation. May God guide us all." He paused, not out of nervousness, but to allow the room to breathe. "To answer your question, Islam did not come to cancel the truth. It came to confirm and complete it. The Quran does not reject Moses or Jesus. In fact, it honors them both. But Islam clarifies the truth that was altered over time." A few in the congregation shifted in their seats. Some looked curious. Pastor David leaned in. "Clarify? Are you saying the Bible is wrong?" Ahmad smiled gently. "I am saying that humans, over time, changed what was once divine. The Quran was sent to restore that original message, that there is only one God, and He has no partner, no son, no equal." The room fell quiet. Ahmad continued, "Every prophet, Noah, Abraham, Moses, Jesus, and finally Muhammad, peace be upon them all, came with the same core message: worship one God. That message did not evolve, but people's interpretation did." There was no applause now. Pastor David cleared his throat. But the Bible says Jesus is the Son of God. How can you deny that? Ahmad raised his eyes. Pastor, may I ask, in Hebrew, the language of the Old Testament, what does the term son mean? The pastor hesitated. Ahmad answered for him. In Semitic language, son was often used to mean servant, obedient one, or beloved of God. Many were called sons of God. It never meant that God literally fathered a child. He paused again. God does not need a son. He is all-powerful. He is eternal. He begets not, nor is he begotten. Murmurs rippled through the room, and in that moment, the debate had shifted. The audience wasn't laughing anymore. A heavy silence now filled the church. What began as a spectacle, a public dismantling of a young Muslim, had transformed into something altogether different. The confident smirks of the congregation had faded. Their eyes, once sharp with judgment, now softened with curiosity, and for some, discomfort. Pastor David clenched the sides of the pulpit. He had expected resistance, not reason. He cleared his throat and pressed on. If your Quran is so perfect, why does it reject the crucifixion of Jesus? Is it not central to salvation? The audience, reinvigorated, nodded. Crucifixion was, to them, the core of redemption. Ahmad stood again, calm as ever. He held the Quran close, then said, "With due respect, Pastor, God does not need blood to forgive. He is most merciful." He turned toward the congregation. Would a loving God punish an innocent man for the sins of others? Would he require the death of a prophet, one so pure, to forgive his own creation? A whisper ran through the pews. The Quran teaches, Ahmad continued, that it only appeared that Jesus was crucified. In truth, he was raised to the heavens by God. He was neither humiliated nor killed. Why would God let his noble messenger suffer such disgrace? The words pierced through layers of belief like light-cutting fog. An elderly woman in the front row clutched her chest. Tears welled in her eyes. She whispered, Then, where is the mercy in our cross? Ahmad gently approached the front steps of the stage. Jesus, peace be upon him, was a messenger, a miracle worker, born of a virgin. Yes, but he never claimed divinity. He called his people to worship the one who sent him. He opened the Quran and recited, "Indeed, Jesus said, Indeed, I am the servant of Allah. He has given me the scripture and made me a prophet." Surah Maryam, 19:30. For a long moment, no one spoke. Even Pastor David, so eloquent, so precise, found himself short of words. His hand trembled slightly as he picked up the Bible. But when he opened it, he hesitated, because the questions that once had clear answers now seemed layered with doubt. In that stillness, a voice rose. It came from a young man seated in the center row. He stood, voice shaking. "I came here to watch a Muslim get humiliated, but instead, I have been humbled. Pastor, this young man is not attacking us. He's reminding us." He looked at Ahmad. "I don't know what's happening to me, but my heart feels like it's waking up." Others began whispering. A woman began to sob quietly into her scarf. An older man clasped his rosary, but didn't raise it. The atmosphere had shifted. No longer a battle of religion, but a call to truth. And Ahmad? He stood quietly, not as a victor, but as a vessel of guidance. The air inside the church felt heavier, but not with tension. It was the weight of realization, of something deeper stirring within souls. Pastor David, still gripping the edge of the pulpit, stared blankly ahead. His voice, once commanding, was now subdued. "How can you be so sure," he asked Ahmad slowly, "that Islam is the final truth, that it is the straight path?" Ahmad didn't rush to answer. He stepped forward, eyes steady. "Because Islam calls us back to the original message of every prophet, to worship God alone, without partners or intermediaries, to pray directly to Him, to live with humility, and to recognize his oneness in everything. He turned toward the pastor. Islam teaches no man can carry the sin of another. That mercy is God's gift, not a transaction purchased through sacrifice. The words didn't just reach Pastor David's ears, they reached his heart, a heart that had long felt burdened by questions he dared not voice. He remembered the first time he held the Bible as a boy, the warmth, the connection. But over time, that innocence faded. Doctrine replaced awe. Fear replaced faith. Now, something was rekindling. From the back of the hall, a woman stood. Her voice cracked as she spoke. "I don't understand everything, but for the first time, I feel peace. I want to learn more." Another followed. A young man raised his hand, eyes glistening. "If what Ahmad says is true, then I've been chasing rituals and forgetting God." And then, from the front row, the same elderly woman who had clutched her chest earlier stood up slowly. Her frail hands shook as she turned toward Ahmad. "Can you teach us how to come closer to God?" Ahmad walked down the steps, humbled. He looked to Pastor David, his voice soft. "Pastor, this isn't a debate. It never was. I didn't come here to win. I came to share." Pastor David sat down heavily in the front pew. His shoulders dropped, and his face, once firm with defiance, now bore the signs of a man in conflict, a man crumbling inwardly beneath years of conviction shaken by truth. I need time," he whispered. Ahmad nodded respectfully. Truth waits for no man, but guidance comes in its own time. At that moment, the congregation's eyes turned to a young woman in the third row. She stepped forward, her voice trembling but resolute. "I want to say it. The words, the declaration." Ahmad's eyes widened slightly, then softened. "Are you sure?" he asked. She nodded. And before hundreds in the very place where she once sang hymns of the Trinity, she placed her hands over her chest and softly repeated after Ahmad, "Ashhadu alla ilaha illallah, wa ashhadu anna Muhammadan Rasulullah." I bear witness there is no God but Allah, and Muhammad is the messenger of Allah. Gasps echoed, and then sobs. People wept, not from grief, but from overwhelming truth. Like a dam breaking one by one, others followed, a father and daughter, a middle-aged man once devoted to the choir, an elderly couple who had attended the church for over 4 decades. Their hearts had found something beyond words, a light, a calling, a return. Ahmad never raised his voice. He never argued. But his calm sincerity had done what fiery debates could not. It had opened hearts. And still seated in the front, hands trembling, eyes red, was Pastor David. His lips moved, silently repeating the Shahada to himself. But he wasn't ready yet. Not yet. The atmosphere inside the church, once echoing with applause and certainty, had transformed into a sacred hush. People wept openly. Some embraced one another, others knelt down right where they stood, overwhelmed with emotion. What was supposed to be a battle of ideologies had become a spiritual awakening. And at the center of it all stood Ahmad, the young Muslim man who had not raised his voice, had not spoken ill of any prophet, and had never belittled anyone's belief. Instead, he had gently guided, reminded, and patiently answered. And it was this sincerity that pierced hearts more deeply than any theological argument could. Pastor David still sat on the front pew, unmoving. His fingers trembled over the leather cover of his Bible. For decades, he had stood at this pulpit, teaching about God, preaching salvation through the cross, counseling the broken. He had dedicated his life to what he believed was the truth. But now, in one night, everything he thought he knew had been shaken to its core. Tears welled in his eyes, but he wiped them away before anyone could see. Ahmad noticed. He walked over slowly and sat beside him, not as an opponent, but as a brother. "Pastor," he said softly. "You are closer to the truth than you think." David looked at him, eyes tired. "I don't know who I am anymore, Bimwen," he whispered. "If I let go of everything, who will I be?" Ahmad smiled gently. "You will be someone finally standing with nothing between you and your Creator." A long silence followed. Then David spoke again. "You've shown me something I've never seen before, not just in your words, but in the peace on your face. I've been a leader for years, but I've never felt that peace." He paused, then lowered his gaze. "But I need time. I need to pray. I'm not ready to say it, not yet, but if I do, will you be there?" Ahmad nodded. "Whenever you are ready, I'll be there." Word spread quickly through the town. That night alone, over 100 people embraced Islam, their shahadas echoing inside the church walls. The once ornate sanctuary, decorated with painted saints and candles, now bore witness to sincere tears and whispered prayers. It was no longer a place of conflict. It had become a place of healing. The next morning, sunlight streamed through the stained glass windows, brighter than ever before. The bells didn't ring that Sunday, but the adhan, the call to prayer, gently played on the soft speakers set up by the new Muslim congregation. People gathered again, not for debate, but for dua, for remembrance of Allah. Even those who hadn't yet accepted Islam stood at the back, silent, respectful, curious. The elderly woman who had taken Shahada first now wore a white scarf around her head. She smiled gently as she helped serve tea to the visitors. The young man who once came to watch Ahmad get destroyed was now learning how to perform wudu. And Pastor David? He returned that evening, quietly, not in robes, not with a sermon, but with a notebook. He approached Ahmad outside the building. "I've started writing again," he said. "Not a sermon, a book, about all of this." Ahmad looked at him in surprise. David nodded. "People need to know the truth, even if it comes from someone who once stood in its way." He looked down at the pages in his hands. "I don't know if I'm ready to say the Shahada, but I'm ready to stop fighting it." Tears lined his eyes. "Pray for me, Ahmad. Pray that God guides me the rest of the way." Ahmad embraced him gently. "I already have." That night, as the stars appeared above the city, Ahmad knelt in prostration, tears slipping down his cheeks, not of sorrow, but of gratitude, for the guidance Allah had sent to so many hearts, for the miracle that happened not with anger or force, but with truth, kindness, and unwavering faith. The night wind prowled through Kitale, a small African village where tall acacia trees scratched at the clouds, and the earth still smelled of rain. Father Emmanuel, aging yet steady, had just closed his worn leather Bible when a piercing cry cut the hush of the church. It was the kind of cry that pierced marrow and would not be ignored. He set down the book, lifted a lantern, and hurried to the thick wooden doors of St. Maria Church. The hinges groaned as he pulled them wide. Outside, on the stone porch, a wicker basket trembled in the wind. Inside the basket lay a newborn, cheeks raw red from the cold, wrapped in a thin cream-colored blanket. Across the tiny chest, a strip of cloth bore strange black letters, graceful, foreign, full of gravity that Emmanuel felt rather than understood. He called for Maria, the gentle church caretaker whose cottage stood a few paces away. "Quickly, bring blankets. There's a child here." Maria arrived breathless, pressing her shawl around the baby and scolding whatever cruel soul had abandoned such innocence on a night of storms. They carried the infant inside, closer to the trembling candlelight. No clues, no note, no footprints on the muddy path, only that cryptic cloth. For 3 full days, Emmanuel posted inquiries with police, asked door to door, and prayed for the parents' return. None came. In the end, the priest signed emergency adoption papers, announcing to a puzzled congregation that the abandoned soul would henceforth be called Nuru, Swahili for light. He appeared in darkness, Emmanuel explained, so perhaps God means him to shine. And shine he did. Nuru, dark-eyed and thoughtful, learned to crawl along stone aisles, to toddle between pews, to speak in soft, complete sentences well before other children. From the first months, a quiet mystery swirled around him. He would pause in the garden at sunset, gaze skyward, as if hearing a melody no one else could catch. At 2 years, he startled Maria by refusing the usual pork stew. "It isn't good," he whispered. The woman thought it mere childish fussiness until she noticed he gladly ate chicken, fish, any meal but pork, and always murmured a small phrase before each bite. The words sounded neither English nor Swahili, but they carried the cadence of prayer. Father Emmanuel tried to dismiss such quirks as coincidence, yet his certainty cracked the night he heard Nuru, still a toddler, sit up in bed during a thunderstorm and pronounce with crystalline clarity, "Allahu Akbar." Emmanuel froze in the doorway, candle trembling. He recognized the Arabic phrase from a dusty concordance, "God is the greatest." But no one in Kitale spoke Arabic, and the boy had never been exposed to Islamic worship. How, then, could this voice emerge from him as easily as a lullaby? Weeks later, Emmanuel strolled with Nuru through the village market and past Basir's general store, where a shortwave radio hummed with Quranic recitation. The child stopped, knelt on the dusty ground, folded tiny hands, and closed his eyes, as if the heavenly language were an embrace. Basir smiled knowingly. "Those verses are from our book," he said. Perhaps his heart recognizes them. Emmanuel's breath caught. A seed of awe, or was it dread, took root. Dreams soon followed. Emmanuel saw deserts under starlit skies, crowds circling a cuboid shrine, the Kaaba, chanting praises that echoed long after waking. He shook these images off by daylight, but they returned with greater insistence each sundown. The cloth, once locked away, seemed to pulse with silent demand. At last, needing answers, the priest brought it to a linguist in a neighboring town. The scholar traced the script with reverent fingertips. "This is Arabic," he confirmed. "It is a prayer. O God, make this child a light in darkness and a guide for lost hearts." Emmanuel's pulse thundered. Could Nuru actually be destined for a calling beyond the church walls? The matter intensified one humid Sunday. Mass had begun calmly, incense curling up toward stained-glass saints. Mid-homily, a high clear voice rose from the front pew. "Allah is the greatest! Allah is the greatest!" Nuru, barely 4, stood on the bench, palms cupped to ears, delivering the full call to prayer, the Azaan, with perfect melody. Congregants gasped. Some crossed themselves, some wept, some felt a curious peace rush over them. Emmanuel's knees buckled. He saw neither rebellion nor possession in the child, only sacred certainty. In a single breath, decades of rigid theology splintered. That evening, alone before the cross, Emmanuel uttered a desperate petition. "Lord, if you are speaking, let me hear." Yet what drifted into his heart was not Latin chant, but the Arabic verse Basir had accidentally played. "God guides whom he wills." The priest found himself yearning, not fearful. He reached for knowledge, secretly reading an English Quran translation by candlelight. The more he read, the more the passages echoed what his soul already murmured about compassion, justice, and tawhid, God's oneness. He felt no betrayal of Christ. Rather, he discovered Christ honored in a way that restored rather than distorted the prophet's humility. Days turned into weeks of study, prayer, and restless introspection. Emmanuel's sermons grew hesitant. His gaze lingered on Nuru's calm face during hymns. Another sign surfaced. Whenever community lunches served pork, Nuru quietly withdrew, quoting in halting English, "Not pure." He had never read Leviticus or Quran's dietary verses, yet his instincts aligned with them. Unable to carry the burden alone, Emmanuel wrote to Ustaz Musa Harun, a Tanzanian convert turned Islamic scholar living in Nairobi. He poured out every marvel: the abandoned basket, the Arabic cloth, the miraculous Azayan, the stirring dreams. Musa answered swiftly, praising Emmanuel's honesty and offering to visit. When he arrived, clad in simple white, his presence exuded tranquility akin to early dawn. They spoke for hours in a small study at the back of the church. Musa recited the Quranic passage where Jesus, son of Mary, foretells a later messenger named Ahmad. He explained the Islamic view of Jesus as honored prophet, not deity, and read verses about sincere seekers promised guidance. Emmanuel felt as though chains fell from his mind. Tears coursed down his cheeks. Decades of dutiful leadership yielded to childlike submission. A week later, beneath a gold-pink sunrise, the villagers gathered in an open field between the old church and a modest new mosque that Bashir and other Muslims had recently built. Emmanuel stood before them, nerves fluttering but heart firm. At his side, Nuru smiled, the same serene, knowing smile that had haunted the priest's dreams. Ustaz Musa led Emmanuel through the Shahada, the testimony of faith. I bear witness there is no God but Allah, and Muhammad is his messenger. Emmanuel, now Yusuf Emmanuel, repeated each word with conviction that shook the leaves overhead. A hush fell. Then cries of Allahu Akbar erupted, rolling like thunder across the field. Some former congregants watched mute, unsure whether to rejoice or recoil. Others approached in tears, struck by the courage of a man who traded prestige for truth. Children tugged at their mothers' sleeves, asking whether angels had descended. Nuru's eyes glistened, but no tears rolled. His mission's first chapter had closed exactly as the mysterious prayer on his baby cloth foretold. News traveled fast. WhatsApp clips, Facebook posts, local radio. Journalists dubbed it Miracle in Kitale. Scholars debated the theological implications. Skeptics called it emotional manipulation. Through it all, Yusuf kept silent, content to pray shoulder to shoulder with farmers and shopkeepers in the small mosque. He learned to recite Al-Fatiha flawlessly, his Swahili accent softened by late-night repetition. Imam Rashid, the local leader, marveled at Yusuf's humility. A man who once led hundreds from a pulpit now swept mosque floors before dawn. Meanwhile, Nuru blossomed. At school, he excelled in languages, understanding Arabic syntax as if recalling rather than studying it. He volunteered to teach classmates the moral tales of prophets Joseph and Moses, stories he drew from both Bible and Quran, harmonizing them with innocent eloquence. Teachers nicknamed him Mtoto wa Nuru, the Child of Light, a title the villagers had unknowingly prophesied when the basket first appeared. One evening, as a saffron sun sank behind acacia silhouettes, Yusuf and Nuru sat on their porch, listening to cicadas hum. "Do you remember being found at the church door?" Yusuf asked gently. Nuru nodded. "I don't remember with my mind," he said, tapping his chest, "but my heart remembers." He paused, searching for words bigger than his years. "Maybe Allah wrote that night so you and I could both find our way." Yusuf smiled through damp lashes. The boy's sentence captured months of turmoil in a single serene truth. Occasionally, Yusuf was invited to address interfaith gatherings. His message remained consistent. I do not condemn my past. Every page led me to this chapter. Jesus taught me compassion. Muhammad taught me completion. Listeners, stirred by his sincerity, often approached seeking Quran translations, echoing the journey that once commenced with a single cloth. Yet not all responded kindly. A faction of former parishioners petitioned to remove Yusuf from village committees, labeling him an apostate. Rumors swirled that Muslims had bewitched him. When confronted, Yusuf only whispered the supplication of peace and refused to argue. He who guides hearts is God, he reminded allies. Opposition dwindled when skeptics observed Yusuf continuing the charity programs he'd started as priest. Free medical clinics, a village well, now funded jointly by churchgoers and mosque members who, inspired by Yusuf's reconciliation, chose collaboration over rivalry. Years elapsed. Kitale itself changed. Dust roads paved, the old church repurposed into a public library where Bible and Quran shared shelves. Elderly Maria, frail yet spirited, often sat beneath the same acacia tree with Nuru, now a tall, soft-spoken youth. She liked to tease that she had been grandmother to a saint long before the village understood it. One clear dawn, Nuru ascended the modest minaret of the mosque for the first time. His voice, matured yet echoing the miraculous night of thunder years ago, poured over Kitale. Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. Homes opened, both Muslims preparing for Fajr and Christians pausing in reverence. The call rolled across fields, mingled with birdsong, and settled in Yusuf's chest like balm. Standing in their humble yard, Yusuf folded his arms and whispered gratitude. He recalled the frightened infant on a church porch, the mysterious Arabic cloth, the toddler reciting the greatest name in candlelit corridors, the storm-dark night when the voice of Islam filled stained-glass halls, and the morning he surrendered pride to truth. All threads wove a single tapestry. God guides whom he wills. The message of their intertwined lives was simple yet immense. Love is larger than labels, and guidance arrives in forms we least expect, sometimes in the fragile hands of a forsaken child. Yusuf prayed silently that anyone who heard their story would open heart and mind, letting light fall where once only certainty stood. For somewhere, perhaps on another stormy night, another basket waited at another doorstep, and another soul was being prepared to walk a road from darkness to dawn. Alhamdulillah, all praise belongs to God, who brings light from the strangest of places and guides whoever sincerely seeks him.